Hey guys, Kristen and Evie here. So a few months ago was Evie's second birthday, and for her birthday she got a car that she can drive around in the backyard. Unfortunately, the car did not go. It did not have enough power to drive through our grass. We would have to take it up into the front yard, and even then it didn't have any power to actually go. So my husband decided to redo the drivetrain to give it a little bit more power, and I decided to film him doing it. So let's go ahead and see how he does it.
So we're getting the jack stands out for this, and basically we're taking everything off the car. We're stripping it down. So here we have the wire diagram that we're going to be using for this new electrical system. First, we've added a key switch so that now the key switch will have to be turned and the pedal will have to be pushed before any power gets to the higher power electronics. Once the key switch and the pedal are pushed, that start relay at the top there will engage and allow power to be transferred down to the PWM motor controller. The PWM motor controller will take a potentiometer input from the speed control board and then transfer that into a PWM signal that's given to the high current reverse relay at the bottom. This is a double pole, double throw relay that's wired in such a way that it controls both motors at the same time, and if the reverse switch is flipped, it actually flips the voltage going to the motors and flips the positive and negative so that they run in the opposite direction. And this allows one big relay to be used to control both motors in either direction. The key to using PWM motor control is this allows us to have the full torque of the motors even when the speed is kept low. This way we can keep it safe for the little one while controlling the speed as she gets older. This will also allow her to drive in the yard where the single motor of the baseline configuration would typically stall out. Now, let's take a look at all these parts. So here we're adding wires to the drive motors. After soldering up the wires, we'll add a little bit of heat shrink as a strain relief, and then get started on the second motor. Now we'll start adding the wiring for the start relay, the key switch, and the other devices we've added into the system. We're using the baseline wire harness to allow us to measure and keep the wires in the same positions and the same length to keep it all nice and tidy. Next up is wiring up the start relay and allowing it to be added to the system. We've measured the wires so that we try to keep them to a minimum length and not have a rat's nest of wires underneath that seat. It's also very important to add a fuse to the system so that if anything does overheat or overcurrent, the fuse will blow instead of melting wires and making the whole thing burn down. This next piece of wire that has a fuse on it is actually our charging port, so we'll have an external way to plug in and charge the vehicle. Back to the car, we'll go ahead and add the drive motors and the axle and wheels. Now we'll go ahead and measure and mark where we're going to have to cut out some of the plastic to fit the main relay or reverse relay as it was labeled in the diagram. Using the Dremel tool here to try to cut out some of this plastic and make a nice space for the relay. Now that we've made a space for the relay, we're going ahead and mount it on the back wall here. Before getting too far, you always got to check that seat fitment and make sure that it's going to work. Now I did have to get a little bit creative on how to add this ignition switch. After rummaging through the garage, I found a couple of washers and a rubber spacer that fit just right. Spray paint them white to kind of match the vehicle. Now we'll go ahead and add the wire harness in by turning the car upside down and following the same wire routing that it was used originally. Now we'll get the pedal wired up and the reverse switch and the key switch. The key switch is kind of interesting because it's normally meant for a vehicle where you'd have an accessory position and a start position. So instead I wired it up to where in the center is off and either direction, left or right, is on. So you don't really have to remember which way to turn the key. Now we're back to under the seat and trying to route all these wires and finishing up our connections. We're mounting back to the wheel motors currently, then we'll wire up the main reverse relay that controls the drive motors. You never want to get too far into a project without testing it out, so here we test out all the switches and key switch to make sure the relays are triggering in the right order. Now attaching some of the pieces of this harness, I'm using some nice crimped on power pole connectors so that if I need to service it, I can unplug a few connections on the high current side and be able to service it. Looks like the PWM works. Now let's get it all buttoned up and ready to go.
and it'll be good. But what did you do?
Replace the motors and battery.
Replace the motors and battery to give it more power?
You could just say replace the drivetrain to give it more power.
Replace the drivetrain to give it more the drivetrain? Yeah, okay. From the yard. Unfortunately, it's so fun to wait. Here, honey. One more time. Hey guys, Kristen and Evie here. Ready? Just look and smile.